Trump's newest threat, quote, "The bullets are flying and it will only get worse." There were no bullets on Sunday, other than those fired by the Secret Service. There was no line of sight for any shots at or near Trump. There are thus far no charges other than gun possession, and the reality of the case suggests there may never be. The man who voted for Trump in 2016 and wanted to shoot or shoot at him in 2024 did not make even the slightest attempt to resist arrest. Trump knows he was never in real danger. In fact, he was genuinely put out that they would not let him finish the round of golf he was cheating through when the would-be almost sorta kinda assassination attempt didn't actually take place. Trump's knowledge of this only underscores that his statement yesterday is yet another stochastic demand for violence to be directed against Vice President Harris and other Democrats and anybody who doesn't like Trump, and that the only brush with reality within that statement is his demand that terrorists be deported from this country, and Trump is the leading domestic terrorist in this nation, and we should start with him. We have known for weeks, we have known for months, that even Trump has perceived that his chances of victory via the ballot are decreasing daily, and that violence and subversion are his only ways to regain power and avoid dying in prison. And so this all becomes another excuse for Trump to threaten this nation and to exploit Sunday's events at a property he owns and apparently provides next to no private security for, to treat this with sweeping statements to the nation's press, which the nation's press is letting him get away with out of fear of being accused of covering up something that, if it happened 500 yards from Joe Biden while Joe Biden was at the White House, would have gotten sober and serious coverage that would have by now faded from the front pages because there was no real danger. Trump, unsurprisingly, made as much danger up as he could and dragged in Kamala Harris and immigration and the prosecutions of him for his espionage and insurrection and other criminality. Quote, "He believed the rhetoric of Biden and Harris and he acted on it," Trump first told Fox about the non-shooter. "They do it with a combination of rhetoric and lawsuits they wrap me up in. These are the things that dangerous fools like the shooter listen to. That is the rhetoric they listen to, and the same with the first one." The first one, of course, the MAGA gun nut who actually shot at Trump. Then Trump posted, quote, "The rhetoric lies as exemplified by the false statements made by Comrade Kamala Harris during the rigged and highly partisan ABC debate." As an aside, I thought he won the ABC debate. Is he saying otherwise? Quoting again, "And all of the ridiculous lawsuits specifically designed to inflict damage on Joe's, then Kamala's political opponent, me, has taken politics in our country to a whole new level of hatred, abuse, and distrust. Because of this communist left rhetoric, the bullets are flying and it will only get worse," unquote. Trump's threat then takes a curious left turn, which explains what his next political strategy is. Steel yourself for this. Quote, "Allowing millions of people from places unknown to invade and take over our country is an unpardonable sin." Trump continued on the theme of deportation, and that segued into a later statement in which it became clearer what he is trying to do now. He is trying to transfer the threat of the political violence he invoked into some kind of threat against minority voters. The polls, of course, say he is hemorrhaging minority voters. Quote, "Illegal migrants who are pouring into our country in record numbers are taking the jobs away from Black and Hispanic people who have held them for years." Unquote. The black jobs line again, but now added to it the threat to Trump. So in what he would call weaving, and what the rest of us would call cynical and irrational exploitation, the environment of political violence which Trump has been fomenting for a decade suddenly becomes an excuse for more prejudice and more suspicion and more violence directed at Democratic leadership and at the migrants already here, whom Trump has previously threatened to expel, even the ones here legally. And suddenly we are back in Springfield, Ohio, and Trump's gangs and militias and the new excuse they have for their racism. Trump is now saying that the migrants there being persecuted, being threatened, living in a city turned upside down by the lies he and J.D. Vance and other Republicans have spread, they are, in fact, some kind of threat to him. The migrants in Ohio are somehow connected to the attempts to shoot at Trump. Also connected to those threats, defending the migrants, prosecuting Trump, the debate he lost last week. It is one giant, delusional, paranoid demand by Trump to America to let him do whatever he wants to. And at its heart are those 10 terrifying words, the bullets are flying and it will only get worse. Only getting worse, of course, is exactly what Trump wants. If, like me, you are of a certain age, perhaps the similarity has already occurred to you between this madman and the madman president played by Martin Sheen in the Stephen King film The Dead Zone. Trump, the bullets are flying. It will only get worse. Martin Sheen, the missiles are flying. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. It gets worse. Trump and his running mate are now, in fact, playing a variant of good cop, bad cop called bad cop, other bad cop, leaving it for J.D. Vance to try to exploit this still further and sow more death threats against the media for not selling the narrative Trump wants. Vance complains about one newscast in particular, something on PBS he saw. Quote, after spending 30 seconds on the second assassination attempt on President Trump, they then focused on the real danger, me and President Trump, who are, according to them, personally responsible for bomb threats against Springfield. Of course, I repeatedly condemned those threats. Donald Trump and I are, by their account, directly responsible for bomb threats from foreign countries. Why? Because we had the audacity to repeat what residents told us about the problems in their town. Meanwhile, Harris allies call for Trump to be eliminated as the media publishes arguments that he deserved to be shot. If you think Vance is hallucinating and is way out on a limb here, he has in fact only started to move out onto that limb. Quoting again, it is one thing to say that pets are not in fact being eaten, and another thing to say that anyone who disagrees is trying to murder people. Dissent, even vigorous dissent, is a great tradition of the United States. Censorship is not, unquote. Now we are approaching Vance's endpoint here. You have to let him make up stories about pets being eaten, otherwise you're not a real American. You have to let him paint a giant bullseye on a town in a state he putatively represents in the Senate of the United States, because the only other option is to support censorship. And JV says censorship means, wait for it, quote, the logic of censorship leads directly to one place, for there is only one way to permanently silence a human being: put a bullet in his brain, unquote. So according to J.V. Vance, this election is now a clear choice between letting him and Trump smear and slander and lie and endanger the lives of and about anyone and anything they want, or supporting bullets in the brain. And remember, this insanity, this cold, bloodless, laser-focused stupidity of J.D. Vance has actually overtaken the the day-to-day lives of the people of Springfield, Ohio. This is from the local newsroom there of Spectrum News. Quote, facilities in Springfield, Ohio that have either been placed on lockdown, evacuated, closed, or searched at some point over the last week due to threats. It coincides with Vance and Trump amplifying what local and state officials say are baseless claims about Haitian migrants eating people's pets and local geese in the community. Here's the list. 1. Springfield City Hall. 2. Springfield's Bureau of Motor Vehicles. 3. Springfield's Driver's Exam Station. 4. Springfield's local Ohio License Bureau. 5. Springview Government Center. 6. Clark County Department of Job and Family Services. 7. Clark County Common Pleas Court. 8. Clark County Board of Elections. 9. Clark County Juvenile Court. 10. A.B. Graham Building. 11. Springfield Academy of Excellence. 12. Fulton Elementary School. 13. Perrin Woods Elementary School. 14. Snow Hill Elementary School. 15. Roosevelt Middle School. 16. Kettering Health Springfield. 17. Mercy Health Springfield Regional Medical Center. 18. Wittenberg University. 19. Clark State College. 20. Simon Kenton Elementary School. 21. Kenwood Elementary School. And he adds, Springfield's annual Culture Fest has been canceled over security concerns. And note, next on the Trumpian schedule is Aurora, Colorado, where even before last week's debate, Trump was claiming immigrant gangs were, quote, taking over buildings. They're going in violently. It was of Aurora that he had said earlier, and getting them out will be a bloody story. The New York Times yesterday quoted what has actually happened in Aurora. As far back as May 2023, Aurora officials have been trying to force an out-of-state landlord to fix up 3 blighted apartment complexes in the downtrodden East Colfax corridor, which connects the cities of Denver and Aurora. In July 2024, the landlord CBZ Management, which says it is based in Colorado and Brooklyn, offered a new argument for why it couldn't repair the buildings. Venezuelan gangs had taken over and the property managers had been forced to flee. On August 5th, a public relations agent, Sarah Latman, hired by CBZ, pitched a, quote, tip to the local Fox television network affiliate in Denver. Quote, an apartment building and its owners in Aurora, Colorado, have become the most recent victims of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua's violence, which has taken over several communities in the Denver area. Unquote. None of this is true. No part of Colorado is under the control of anybody but bad landlords. And there is criminality in Aurora, Colorado, and it is not gangs. It is a bunch of landlords and their PR person, Sarah Latman. And then there's the Leon theory. Elon Musk to you, Leon to Trump, and the greatest rationalization of them all. It's the, when I say it, everybody knows I'm joking. When you say it, it's the deep state trying to murder our president. Sometime early Sunday evening, somebody called Doge designer, one of these crypto idiots, tweeted why they want to kill Donald Trump. Elon, of course, then retweeted this, adding, and no one is even trying to assassinate Biden/Kamala, with an emoji. It's his site and he can put out what he wants, but frankly, that is the kind of thing that if you wrote it in public, the Secret Service would be asking for an appointment to see you within 24 hours. And they should be asking to see what Elon Musk meant by this, since he is running a super PAC for Trump. And he has expressed violence before, and he is a known drug user, and most importantly, he has government contracts and security clearances, none of which should continue beyond this week. In point of fact, he should have been imprisoned by Monday morning. But he wasn't. Musk deleted this tweet sometime early Monday without making any comment nor an explanation other than something about how he should know by now that if he says something and he gets a bunch of laughs in the room, that won't necessarily translate to this lousy website, which he owns and has made lousy. There was something that was obscured by Elon Musk that was even worse and more directly addresses this issue of when I say it, it's political commentary. When you say it, it's a threat against Trump and you should be shot, arrested, jailed, castrated, whatever it is they feel like doing that day, or have your town turned into the focal point of every idiot and every racist and every backdoor bomber in the world. This is from the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. At least it's their account. They claim to be the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. Libertarian is just another word for Trumpist, of course. Somebody wrote, I disagree with the assault weapons ban, but maybe save the threatening rhetoric, eh? And they retweeted that with this message, quote, anyone who murders Kamala Harris would be an American hero. At LPNH, Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. If they're not the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, they probably should have denied the existence of this and gotten the blue check mark removed from the account using that name. Anyone who murders Kamala Harris would be an American hero. Well, I'm sure they just meant that as a metaphor. Well, maybe not. Later on, that tweet vanished. We deleted a tweet, read a subsequent tweet, because we don't want to break the terms of this website we agreed to. It's a shame that even on a free speech website that libertarians cannot speak freely, libertarians are truly the most oppressed minority. Yes, when you advocate in a stochastic manner the murder of the Vice President of the United States, that is somehow a violation of your rights. What's the distance between what Elon Musk wrote and what this Libertarian Party of New Hampshire wrote? And no one is even trying to assassinate Biden. Kamala, anyone who murders Kamala Harris would be an American hero. My argument would be these are adjacent. And somebody from the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, who's responsible for their social media, should be in jail next to Elon Musk. Musk, minimally, needs to have his security clearance revoked. It would be nice if we could get him out of this country. I don't think we can do that. Apparently, we have people in space who need his Cybertruck or something to get home because we went to use a Boeing craft to get them home, and the Boeing craft apparently cannot get out of the hangar. There's more than this, of course. It's not just the tech bros and the libertarians who are doing this. Scott Perry, who I believe has his phone back finally after January 6th and whatever his role was in the attempted coup, said yesterday that nobody is trying to assassinate Joe Biden. They can't get to his bedroom to find him sleeping, but President Trump is out there and they're actively trying to assassinate him. The Secret Service needs to take actions that are concurrent with the risk on the ground. Scott Perry, Congressman of Pennsylvania. In other words, he's saying take security from Joe Biden and assign it to Donald Trump so he can golf whenever he wants to and not have the risk of having somebody from 400 feet away try to shoot him from a public street. Representative Laurel Lee of Florida basically insisted that Democrats must stop campaigning on all the bad things Trump does and says and threatens, because when the truth like that is revealed, it makes people mad and they might try to take a shot at Trump. One might suggest to Representative Lee that perhaps it is Mr. Trump who should not be saying these things. Mr. Trump who should not have been invoking the question of violence and politically violent activity and rhetoric. But of course, that ship sailed literally in a previous decade, and the average congressperson representing the Republican Party is a flaming idiot like Laurel Lee. And of course, again, I'll circle back to the Trump quote himself. Their rhetoric is causing me to be shot at. In short, the one through line in all of this, from Elon Musk to the libertarians to Scott Perry to Laurel Lee, is I never thought the leopard would eat my face. See, I'm going to let you in on two secrets, one of which you already know and the other which you probably don't, about political violence. Number one, we have talked about the peaceful transfer of power in this country as if it were built into the Constitution and it had been observed for every one of our presidential transfers since the first of them. And obviously it has not. The Civil War is a strong argument against the idea that we have had peaceful transfers of power. The name Kennedy would be the same thing. In any event, you cannot open Pandora's box as Trump has and then pick the box up, shaken it, and let its contents spill out everywhere and direct the evils contained within the mythological Pandora's box, direct those evils to leave you alone. Once you open the box, it can go anywhere. I have no desire to see politicians killed. I have no desire to see anyone killed, and particularly have no desire for any gun violence in this country. But guess what happens? Leopards, box, open box, leopards everywhere. Leopards eat faces. Trump has a face under all the makeup. Now the secret that you probably are not aware of. You cannot ultimately stop political violence. You can try. You can minimize it. We have done an excellent job, in fact, certainly since, well, let's see, how many times was the Clinton White House shot at? How many times were the threats against Obama and Bush and Biden and Trump? And well, okay, we haven't done that good a job of it. But on the other hand, we haven't had one killed since 1963. 61 years without a fatality. But you cannot stop it ultimately, as has been said many times. If a madman wants to surrender their own life in the attempt to take that of a politician's, it will probably happen. Not always. And there are ways to minimize that too. But I had a harrowing experience with this, and I've been dealing with political violence or the threat of it now for literally 26 years. My first experience with it dates back to 1998. Minor threats, letters, anonymous letters, warnings, threats, etc., none of which was ever dealt with very seriously because it wasn't that kind of threat. And you cannot live your life that way. You cannot live your life inside a bubble. If you cannot run the risk, get out of the risk area. But I've dealt with this as recently as 2019. And I've had the simple ones, idiots in public telling me to kill myself, and people leaving threatening notes and sending notes to old addresses. But in 2019, I got one of those serious ones where the FBI called me up and said, "You're in Cesar Sayoc's computer. We've finally done unloading everything in Cesar Sayoc's computer, and you apparently were in his second wave." Cesar Sayoc, the MAGA bomber, the guy with the drawn-on hair, and the van in which every inch of the outside of this van was covered in a Trump sticker or something like it, who sent pipe bombs to a dozen Democrats and legislators and all kinds of liberals. Well, if he had not gotten caught and been sent to prison, I was on the second list. But principally, and this is back to the point of the secret you probably are not aware of, there was 2006. I've told many times the story of the guy who lived in his mother's basement in Southern California who kept sending me threatening letters filled with fake anthrax. And obviously it was fake anthrax. The experts who deal with real anthrax in the mail, the one we know of, apparently killed himself because he didn't do it right. It's not an easy fix. It's not a self-addressed stamped envelope full of anthrax. So it probably was not anthrax, but I could not make that decision on behalf of everybody else who lived in my apartment building, especially the surprisingly large number of 95-year-old women who lived in that building, so I got the authorities involved. And by the time of the fourth letter, I knew them all by their first names, and I used to make them call me up with updates, and I would call them with updates. And then came, finally, a letter to my office at MSNBC, and the giveaway was the return address was Jay Leno, NBC, Burbank, California. J. Leno. Well, that's not how Jay Leno writes his name. Why would you abbreviate your name J-A-Y as a J period? If your name is Jay, it's J. Also, there was postage on this. I knew Jay Leno for nearly the whole run of his career at NBC on The Tonight Show, and I know very well that Jay Leno would never spend $1.25 to send me a letter, not when he could put it in an interoffice pouch and save himself $1.25. In any event, when I saw this, I knew immediately that it probably was from my correspondent in Southern California sending me the fake anthrax. And so I called one of the agents at the FBI and went, hey, I got another one, but it's here in Secaucus. Oh, okay, we'll be right over. What do I do here? We've never gotten one here before. Well, tell whoever's in charge of the plant, of the building, and if there's a small chance that it's actually anthrax, NBC irradiates all the mail. Remember from getting the anthrax 2001? That's only 5 years ago. They're still irradiating all the mail. There's no danger. Well, of course, I called the guy who was running Secaucus for NBC News, for MSNBC. And when I told him what had happened, he went into a screaming panic. His solution to this was to insist that I stay in my office, in my little cubicle, and not leave. And I said, well, what's the danger here? You irradiated all of this. The mail is taken to a separate facility and everything is checked. And there's no threat whatsoever. I just wanted you to know that this was here and the FBI guys are coming over, so nobody should be surprised. There's no threat to this. He looked like, I don't know quite how to describe it. He looked like he had just eaten some anthrax, is the only way I can possibly describe it to you. Sure enough, guess what I found out that day? They did not irradiate every letter incoming to MSNBC, or for that matter, NBC News. They simply said that, thinking that that would discourage people from sending actual anthrax, thinking, well, I went to all this trouble of mailing anthrax and not killing myself, and here it is going to be of no damaging value to me. By the time it gets there, it will have spoiled, or NBC will have spoiled it through its irradiation machines. I don't know how universal this is, but I don't even know if there are irradiation machines that could neutralize anthrax or any other biological weapon, let alone something like a pipe bomb. But the look on the guy who was running the Secaucus plant for NBC told me all I needed to know. The problem with political violence is not just that it is a tool to change history, not that it risks the lives of the people who are the potential victims, both the targets and the ones who are stochastically urged to take political violence into their own hands, as Trump has been doing nonstop since 2015. It's not just that. On a bigger level, it is what I mentioned before, the Pandora's box effect. You never know what the next step is going to be or what will happen. The unintended consequences rule comes into play immediately. There was, in fact, nothing to protect any of us at NBC News except the illusion. I don't know to what degree this is true of the Secret Service. I think we found out around January 6th, and in my commentaries of 2022 and 2023, you may recall I urged President Biden to fire the Secret Service and start all over again because they were not doing a very good job of protecting him. This might be the only thing we all agree on. The Secret Service has not been doing its job, perhaps for several different presidencies. But this raises the larger question, exactly what can they do? If you own the golf course and the golf course is out there in public in Florida, how much of it can you protect? How much of it can you ring with agents? How many agents would you need? 30,000 to completely cover a place like a golf course? And here's the end part of this story. Hopefully the laugh you can take with you. A dark and bitter laugh, I assure you, but it is a laugh. The response in 2006, when the letter, which did not actually contain fake anthrax, but did contain the means by which we finally identified this guy, and he wound up going to prison as a result. The envelope itself with a barcode on it. That envelope produced this response from MSNBC to protect all of us. The guy told me to stay in my office and close the door, and he would be right back with a protective device. Within 90 seconds, he was back outside my clear see-through door, and there was his protective device. A bright, orange, extra large traffic cone. We all felt safe after that. Also of interest here, the good news. Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris, according to USA Today, narrowly leads Trump in the critical battleground state of Pennsylvania and in two of the state's key bellwether counties, according to a trio of exclusive USA Today Suffolk University polls taken after the debate. The bounce is here, and strong. Harris leads Trump, the Republican nominee, 49-46. 500 likely Pennsylvania voters say. That is, however, within the margin of error, 4.4. 49-46. And, thank goodness, built into the stupidity of the Trump cult, there is always comic relief. One of Trump's guys thinks Trump was threatened with a riffle. There is clear evidence Trump is suffering from some kind of thumb erectile dysfunction. And Trump may have just lost his most valuable endorsement, that of the wife of the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs football team. Worst person's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown. Mixing up the format a little bit today, I'm going to tell the sad story of the financial and aesthetic suicide of Major League Baseball. The postseason will feature advertisements 5 inches wide each on the sides of every batting helmet on every player in every game. Now, there is a good news here. There is a silver lining, and that is that baseball's postseason ratings have collapsed so much, almost nobody will see these eyesores. Coming up in sports. First, there are still more new idiots to talk about, the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, worse, Bryland Hollyhand. That's the name. I don't make them up, Pally. Bryland Hollyhand, chairman of a youth group for Trump. I'm not sure, Embryos for Trump? Bryland writes, camping outside the president's golf course without being detected until the gun barrel aims at the president. That's not true. Another failure by the Secret Service. Swift action once detected, but he never should have been allowed to camp by the fence with a riffle. Lots of questions, writes Bryland Hollyhand. I got a question. This kid is 18 years old. Certainly, even being a Trump supporter, certainly he should know by now the difference between rifle, a gun, usually used to shoot school kids with, and riffle, which is a verb meaning to leaf through pages. Then again, if his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hollyhand, really named him Brylan, Brilyn, what chance did he ever have? The runners-up, worser, Speaker Mike Johnson and Trump. Johnson visited Trump, still shaken and disturbed by not being allowed to finish his golf game Sunday. They took the thumbs up picture. Johnson's thumb is fully erect vertically, pointed up, as ordered by God. This Johnson works. But something is clearly wrong with Trump's thumb. Trump's thumb is horizontal in the picture. It's pointing towards the camera. Trump just can't get it up. His thumb. He can't get up his thumb. What were you thinking? But our winner, the worst Trump himself. He has cost himself a surprisingly useful endorsement. Taylor Swift, of course, endorsed Vice President Harris after the debate. Among other things, Ms. Swift is the girlfriend of Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe she has a day job as well. But Trump had been endorsed by the wife of the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, Pat Mahomes. Then Trump decided he had to tell the world on Sunday, quote, "I hate Taylor Swift." From the British tabloids, quote, that prompted Brittany Mahomes to, quote, question if she will continue to endorse Trump's campaign. She is questioning her support for Donald Trump after he lashed out at Taylor, saying he hates her, a source exclusively revealed to DailyMail.com. This deeply bothered Britney because Taylor is like a sister to her, and she has done absolutely nothing wrong. Quote, she didn't mention Trump in her post and is allowed to speak her mind. The source added that Trump's decision to react in such a hateful manner upset Britney. Quote, she does not believe in hate in any form and loves Taylor so much, the insider continued. This shook her to the core. Trump, saying he hated her friend shook Mrs. Mahomes to her core. All the racism, sexism, criminality, the attempt to overthrow the government, the new attempt to overthrow the government, and by the way, all the hate in every form that he's already expressed, all that was dandy with her. All right, Mrs. Mahomes, we take all people who see the light. All right, fine. And you can redeem yourself easily. Just withdraw your endorsement in public. Of course, prepare yourself. If you do that, Trump will then issue a fatwa against you like he does everybody else who thwarts him. Donald, domestic J terrorist, today's worst person in the world!
This is Sports Center. Wait, check that. Not anymore. This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
In Sports Central Center update tonight. Kind of breaking with the format here, but what the hell? Dateline New York. I have theorized for some time that the man running the National Hockey League, Gary Bettman, is actually an agent of the National Basketball Association sent to the National Hockey League to make sure it is in no way as successful as the National Basketball Association. Just a pet theory of mine during my more delusional days, or more insightful days. However, there is a concomitant theory that relates to Major League Baseball. Rob Manfred, who I did not know but was a contemporary of mine at Cornell University in the year 1978-79, and if you told anybody on campus there is one guy here who will wind up being commissioner of baseball, they all would have pointed at me. Rob Manfred is working for somebody who is trying to destroy baseball. There is no other possible explanation. I'll just read part of this press release. Major League Baseball has announced a multi-year partnership with a German workwear company called Strauss. The deal will see the Strauss logo added to both sides of all 12 team batting helmets during every baseball postseason and World Series game starting this year, next month, through the end of the season of 2027. It will also apply to all baseball regular season games held in Europe, as well as all minor league baseball games, regular and postseason, from 2025 forward. The Strauss logo will appear in two different colorways, depending on the helmet on which it's being worn. For teams with red helmets, the decal will feature a transparent version of Strauss's ostrich logo placed inside a white box. Helmets of any other color will have the ostrich in white inside a red box. Both feature the company name to the right of the ostrich in white letters. 5-inch wide on both sides of every batting helmet in every baseball playoff and World Series game, in addition to the ads on the uniforms, in addition to the patches that say World Series. They'll all look like racing car drivers or like a little league team. 5 inches wide, advertising a company selling a product nobody buys. Strauss German workwear. They were the high bidder, I assume? Strauss German workwear. So Commissioner Manfred is working for the Bundesliga, the German soccer outfit. Is that it? because there aren't that many things left for Rob Manfred to do to destroy baseball's postseason and World Series. I have not gone to a Major League Baseball game in this season of 2024. I believe there were 2 years in the 90s where, mostly because of logistics, I was out in the middle of nowhere in Connecticut. I couldn't easily get to one, and I didn't. I know at least 1 year I did not go at all. This year I have not gone, even though the subway that goes to the Mets home stadium literally runs under my house. It just has not been worth it. I miss my friends. I'd go to see them. But the games I know I'm watching have no relevance to the postseason. The teams that do well immediately get eliminated. Or if they don't get eliminated and go on to play in the World Series, they'll meet a team so much better than they are that they'll be like the Phillies from a couple of years ago, leading the series 2-1. Then they got no hit and never led again in the entirety of the series and got blown out. It was an embarrassment. I felt sorry for the players. I'm 65 years old. There are no athletes I should feel sorry for. Baseball has destroyed itself. And now it's going to stick a big ad on the side. The big words Strauss and an ostrich. If there's anything more appropriate to describe the commissionership of Robert Manfred, who transferred from some local school into Cornell University in 1978, it's an ostrich. In June of this year, the infielder Justin Turner, now of the Mariners and generally one of the most thoughtful of all baseball players in the last 2 decades, had one of the worst ideas of all time. This is how bad things are getting. Appearing on a streaming show called Foul Territory, Turner was asked what he would do if they let him be commissioner for a day. Please, God, let's try it anyway. He suggested expanding from 30 to 32 different teams, completely eliminating the current format of American League and National League, and rearranging things so that the World Series is always East versus West, with a big Strauss logo on it and an ostrich. The television audience for the World Series reached its peak in 1978. Coincidentally, the year Manfred and I were both at Cornell. 44 million viewers on average watched the World Series games, the 6 games between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees. Last year, the average was, I believe, 8 million viewers per game? 9? So the audience is about 1/10, 1/9 what it was in 1978, even though the population is 1/3 greater than it was in 1978. The net loss here is spectacular. It's more than 90% against the growth of the country. Why did the World Series die? There are 1,000 reasons, one of which is an ostrich. But the easiest one to comprehend is this. In 1978, the average television viewer had 4 channels to choose from. Maybe 5, maybe 6. Some people had cable, but not many. There weren't a lot of choices. The World Series was live. Baseball was much more popular. But, you know, if you're watching TV, there aren't a lot of choices. Necessarily, many more would be watching the baseball who are now watching, I don't know, streaming something, watching Mad Men for the 700th time. But one of the other reasons that the decline reached epidemic proportions, and I mean, if the audience was half what it was in 1978, that would make sense. It's realistically 8 or 9% of what it was. And the earliest signs of this, the earliest signs show up with the earliest actions that would go into the Justin Turner idea of eliminating the American and National Leagues. In 1996, the Braves and the Yankees played in the World Series. Even though the Braves won the first game by a huge amount, blew the Yankees out, and again in the second game, looked like a runaway, they still averaged 25 million viewers per game that year. And I remember going on SportsCenter and saying, yeah, the ratings are in decline. Nobody is willing to say this, but what happens 25 years from now? Well, we find out. 1997, the next year, they began interleague play. Until 1997, teams from the American League and the National League had never played each other except in spring training or exhibition games or in the World Series, never played each other when it counted since the American League opened for business in 1901. The World Series was an utterly novel event, and it was also that thing that all sports leagues try to fabricate today, create artificially. This was an actual but organic rivalry. Because most American League fans, up till 1997, hated the National League, or at least disrespected it, and vice versa. There used to be endless arguments, scholarly articles, research in the Society for American Baseball Research annual guide, research into which league was better than the other league. And this was true because, well, I'll use the example of my grandfather, Victor Charbonnier. He died in 1987, and he died in 1987 hating the American League. He would watch the World Series. He would watch the All-Star Game. He would root against the American League. He didn't know most of the players. He didn't know many of the teams. He didn't know that the Washington Senators that he saw play in 1961 were an entirely different franchise than the ones he'd seen as the Washington Senators in 1960. He wasn't that sophisticated a fan, but he hated the American League. He knew that much. He would mock the New York Yankees of the American League. He insisted they played in the weaker league than did the National League New York Mets. He was loyal to the National League even though his team, the New York Giants, had moved out of New York in 1957. He still preferred the National League because it was a rivalry. And his hatred in 1987 owed to something that had happened in July 1903. My grandfather was a little boy when the star shortstop of his National League New York Giants, a man named George Stacey Davis, jumped his contract and went and signed with the Chicago White Sox of the new American League. That had happened actually in 1902. In 1903, Davis had jumped back to the New York Giants, but as part of the peace settlement between these two leagues that were at war, and war in baseball means driving up salaries, owners don't like that. When they settled it and drove salaries down, Davis was ordered back to Chicago as part of the settlement. Grandpa, even though he was a little boy who really didn't understand any of this stuff, and I don't know that he heard it firsthand. It may have been his older relatives who were angry and he just inherited that. Grandpa was still angry about George Stacey Davis 84 years later. You can't possibly buy that kind of rivalry. Hatreds like that were inherited, cultivated, maintained, cherished, enjoyed. My mother became a New York Yankees fan entirely because she knew it would piss off her father, my grandfather. That's why I had become a Yankee fan when I was a kid, because I went with the games to her, see her team. You may try to create rivalries like that. In fact, they form only from true hatred, true division. It was Coke versus Pepsi. It was Republican versus Democrat for profit. And when baseball stopped keeping the leagues separate, stopped making the World Series the battle, the only battle between the leagues, it suddenly didn't mean that much. The New York Mets versus the New York Yankees was something I dreamed of seeing as a kid. Oh, what my grandfather would have made of that. They finally faced each other in the World Series of 2000. I was the host for Fox. Seemingly, this would have been the epitome of my sports career. The ratings, the lowest the World Series had ever had. That was the big sign. Interleague play began in 1997. The 1996 World Series audience had been 25 million viewers a game. Within 4 years, they were down to 18 million. Since 2004, when the Red Sox won their first World Series since 1918, the average has been more than 20 million a game only once. It was last as high as 14 million per game 6 years ago. If you want to make the World Series live again, you have to make it interesting to fans whose teams are not playing in it. That used to be everybody, because you were also a fan not just of a team, but of a league. It may not be salvageable. It may be too late. It may be dead forever. It may be extinct. But what baseball should do is eliminate all interleague play and see if it can bring the league versus league rivalry back to life, rather than saying, I think we could put a second ad on the helmets next to the ostrich, like in the back of the helmet, or on the front where that, why does the Texas Ranger helmet have that T on it? We're not getting any money off that. It's the team logo, sir. Well, we're not making any money off of it. How about we put a little, like a miner's light on top of each helmet and put an advertisement on each side of that? Think of all the different birds we can put up there. Grandpa wasn't just still angry about George Stacey Davis 84 years later. He was also convinced that the National League played real baseball, and the American League was not only weak and bad, but that the American League was fixed so that the Yankees would win the pennant nearly every year. He had to watch the World Series because it was existential to him and to millions of others, 44 million TV viewers a night. They won't get 44 million viewers for the World Series in its entirety if it goes 7 games next month. You cannot buy that kind of devotion from customers. You cannot forge it. The crazy has to be organic. And baseball has been steadily eliminating the crazy, and it has made its World Series small and smaller and smallest, and now it's putting ads for a company nobody's ever heard of before on both sides of every helmet in every playoff and World Series games. Strauss! All the helmets. Not even, mind you, an ad for a company people have heard of. I mean, you could probably gain an audience if instead of the ads reading Strauss, they read Chico's Bail Bonds. I've done all the damage I can do here, and no, I'm not arguing against advertising on sports uniforms. You get used to it as long as it's small and not like standing out on top of every helmet, only in the postseason. Here's our marquee item. Let's punish you with more advertising. What do you mean nobody watched the game last night? I mean, you're saying the ratings were down from, what, literally? Nobody watched. They're not even going to put all the lights on tonight to save some money? Look, the World Series once in 1890 was so unpopular, baseball so alienated its audience that the World Series of 1890 was tied 3 games for Brooklyn, 3 games for Louisville, 1 game tied. The attendance had dropped to about 400 fans. The weather was bad. And when it came time to play the decisive game, they said, nobody's here. Why bother? The World Series was abandoned in 1890. It could happen again, but at least Strauss will get its ads on the helmets as they knock down the stadiums or something. Thanks for listening. Please send this to somebody who doesn't. We're now back to 5 episodes a week, posting nightly just after midnight Eastern. Once again, there is a Monday countdown. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on guitars, bass, and drums. This was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Stevie Van Zandt. Everything else is pretty much my fault. That's Countdown for this, the 50th day until the 2024 presidential election. That counts today and Election Day. The 1,344th day since convicted felon Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the election. Use the mental health system. Use presidential immunity if we have to keep him from doing it again legally while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Cross off the name Strauss Workwear from potential advertisers here. Till the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.